Hello again, Michael Ware with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. I've got Bill Gustoff with me today, managing partner of Hagenow Gustoff. I've been wanting to sit down and have a conversation with Bill in front of somebody for a long time so that they could glean some of his knowledge, and this seemed like a really good way to do that. And I know that it's a lot of value for IFC members and Iowans in general. In fact, there's a lot of people just beyond our borders that would benefit from hearing this conversation. So we have a lot of people that call us or email IFC about the Form 1 or the Form 4 process because they're buying a weapon or going to build a weapon that's on the NFA list, the National Firearms Act list. So an example would be a silencer, suppressor, short barrel shotgun, short barrel rifle, those kinds of things. And when they're filling out their Form 1 or their Form 4 paperwork, the first thing they see is how to fill this out. Is that an individual, a trust, or a corporation? And then the question becomes, well, which one should I want, or which one do I want, and which one do I prefer, and why? I have strongly held opinions on that. I think that trusts offer many people a great deal of latitude and flexibility that you may not get as an individual. I think Bill is prepared, obviously, to talk about that. But I recommend that people think through that before they start the Form 1 or Form 4 process, because if they're going to do this as an individual and then decide that they want to switch over to a trust or something later, then they'll incur another tax stamp, another $200 per serial number. And some of these customers that I have seen, some of the people that have called into or communicated rather into IFC may have multiple serial numbers. Some of them have a lot. And so it's quite an expense to do it a second time. So I think that these are things we need to bring to bear on the front end. So with that, why don't we lead into a little, if you want to explain a little bit more about who you are and what you do. And just for anybody out there, or everyone rather, Bill Gustoff represents the Iowa Firearms Coalition, and he's done that for a number of years. He's done that exceedingly well. And I can tell you we have a great deal of confidence in Bill and his abilities and his firm as a whole. So thank you for your hard work and your help of the organization, the Iowa Firearms Coalition. Thank you, Bill. Why don't you go ahead and begin?
Thank you, Michael. I love to talk about issues like this, as you know, and we're compatriots to the cause. I joke that we're the law firm of the vast right-wing conspiracy in Iowa. So we have a bunch of generally conservative attorneys. We have a couple of legislators, one retiring, but legislators, and we're involved in party politics, partisan politics, and such. So we take a lot of these things on, like the Iowa Firearms Coalition, largely out of cause and concern for the issues, as we do just trying to make a living and do those sorts of things. And as you know, we're not getting rich off of the sort of things that we do with some of these things, but we try to find that balance. And gun trusts, as you indicated, prior to 2013, in kind of the 2013-2014 timeframe, there was no such thing be concerned about in Iowa, because we didn't have suppressors or short barrel rifles and shotguns. We still don't have machine guns and other destructive devices allowed in Iowa, but we got calls, largely because of our affiliation with your group and the NRA, that we got calls in late 2013 and beginning of 2014 asking if we do gun trusts or firearms trusts, and our response was, well, we do now. So, and prior to that, I don't know that anybody in Iowa had done such a thing. So sure. We had a learning curve as well. And so we do these firearms trusts. You can buy these things off the shelf if you want. They'll plug your name into a form. You won't get any counsel. They may work, they may not work. If they don't work, we can help clean it up too. They'll spend more than the $100 or $200 you spent to get that done, to get it cleaned up. And so we've come out with some forms where we try to offer something that's comparable to that, and then offer bigger steps or more involved planning that people want. So firearms trusts. Go ahead.
Can I stop you for just 1 second? There are a lot of people who ask me, what's the value in going to a Hagenow Gustoff and spending extra money when I could go online for $75 and get this one-shot trust? What's the difference? And I tell them usually, and you're better qualified to do this than me, but usually what I tell them is very simple. Most of those universal trusts that you can buy online may satisfy the prerequisites for the ATF regarding the trust contents and whatever else, legalese, etc. But at the end of the day, I would tell you that they serve to be a horrible future planning document if somebody were to really delve into them, or some sort of magistrate decides that he needs more, or whatever. I mean, I'd like for you to talk about that briefly if you have a second, but I have seen some of these documents, and actually I've seen a lot of them that come through my personal business, and I've got to tell you, they're marginal at best. So I think that there's a really good reason why people would want to solidify their gun trust, if you will, in terms of true future planning rather than just checking a box for ATF. So can you speak to that for just a second?
Sure, it's broader than that. It's, people go to LegalZoom and do their wills and trusts just for basic planning too. And I tell people quite honestly, my anecdotal evidence would be 80% of the time, will those things work and get the job done? Probably, but not because they were necessarily done well or done right. It's because nobody raised questions and there was no problem.
Yeah.
Where we run into is when there is a problem, that hundreds of dollars or whatever you thought you were saving turns into thousands spent to clean up a mess, and you're just not getting any counsel with this when you do it this way. You're plugging names into a form, so sometimes you get what you paid for.
Yeah.
And so we have entry level ones, we have more advanced ones where you can change who the beneficiaries are, add people, remove people, and a lot of those forms that are out there that you can just download. That's a guy looking to put his can in a trust and go shoot his can, go shoot his suppressor without, with just the trust in place. I'm not sure what you gain by doing that. Ours has some planning involved in it. So we tried to price the structure. Yes, you're not going to do it for $75 or $100. You can spend $200 or $300 or so to get it done with a basic trust for us. A little more if you want to do some additional planning. You can spend a lot more if you want to do some really advanced planning. We do that as well, but we tried to price it in the structure. And we actually, because of our affiliation with IFC and NRA, we give discounts to members. In fact, if you aren't a member of the IFC or a member of the NRA, we give discounts for each of those that is bigger than a year's membership to those organizations. So you gain, they gain, and you get the pricing down to what's
fantastic.
So we're trying to help our friends as well. So we're compatriots to the cause. And you also, in this case, have somebody doing this for you that really cares about these issues. We care about the Constitution, about the Second Amendment, and all these different issues. And we've been involved. I've been involved with the Iowa Firearms Coalition since it was Iowa Carry. So,
yep.
So we cleaned up some things. So that's kind of the general comment on that. And then I suppose we want to talk about how these gun trusts, why you would do a gun trust, how they work.
Yes,
so,
please.
So the whys on a gun trust, some of the why lost a little bit of its zip when they passed the Rule 41F from the ATF that used to be you could avoid all this different printing for all these different folks, but they took some of that away for a time period. It used to be you got approved and did your background check and you had a kind of a grace period then. They took that away, and 41F makes it clear that anytime there's a transfer into or an application to transfer or to make a firearm, whether in a trust or otherwise, you're going to go through the application process, fingerprinting and photos, and filling out the application, the questionnaire for the responsible person. But you can still avoid it. You can have more than one person be able to use these firearms without having to go through all the background check. You can have basically be one person doing that, which is most of what we do. And it simplifies it. You can simplify it so that if you leave these assets at your death to beneficiaries in a trust, sometimes you don't have to transfer it again. So it's not putting all those beneficiaries that might become entitled to a firearm or an undivided portion of a firearm through the background check. So it can really facilitate how you handle them. The Firearms Trust is a great way to segregate those specific firearms. These trusts have specific language in there tied to the National Firearms Act. And once we get the question of why couldn't we just add that language to our regular trust? And it would be a drafting nightmare, and it just mixes things. It's apples and oranges, and so it's very good to keep them in the separate pocket with these separate regulations. And that way, if the regulation changes and you need to update that trust, you can do it easily with the precision you need to. And so those are the kind of the big reasons, at least from an administrative and planning point of view, is it facilitates management, facilitates who's using them, how you can add people, subtract people that can use them, and how they can pass after you're gone, and adds flexibility. And then the other big one that still hangs out there is it's the specter of this thing called constructive possession, right? So I can't say that I've seen, we don't, at this point in life, we don't have the ATF pounding on doors and coming in and inspecting for weapons. Not yet anyway, but so it's a specter that hangs out there where you run into constructive possession, and I'm not a criminal law attorney, but you run into, it really comes out of the background of drug crimes and racketeering and things where, you know, a husband's a drug dealer and his wife knows about it and it's going on in their home and she's putting up with it. And so they serve a warrant and they charge her with constructive possession, even though she wasn't the drug dealer or in possession. There's always this concern that if something goes wrong and they're coming after your firearms, that spouse can be charged with constructive possession. And so even though I haven't seen that happening yet, and to the extent constructive possession does get charged that I've seen in firearms, it's usually because they're tacking something on. They've got a list of something. Somebody really screwed up, and they've got a list of what they're coming after them for. And by the way, they're getting you for constructive possession as well. So it's just trying to put the screws to somebody. So those are the reasons you do them, and it's just an effective way to do it. Fairly cost effective, but it adds cost to getting your suppressor, your SBL or SBS. Sorry, but it adds a little cost to those things. But you don't have, you have to do it only once, and you can have this trust to take possession of any of those kinds of firearms.
Okay.
So the process. So the process is, and you already alluded to this. You don't want to go buy your suppressor or your firearm, and then go create a trust and then transfer it. That's not only two transfer tax fees. It's 2 times of filling out the responsible person questionnaire. 2 times of submitting fingerprints. It's 2 times of getting a photo submitted with it. It's 2 times of notifying the chief law enforcement officer of the area where you reside. And so there have been improvements with 41F, but you know it didn't take all that away. And so you're better off to create the trust, and then take possession directly into the trust of this particular firearm, because then there's one time that any responsible person has to go through that background check.
Okay.
So otherwise it's the same forms. Form 1 if you're manufacturing, Form 4 or 5 depending on the transferring. There's a new Form 23 that they came out with. It's a responsible person questionnaire that every responsible person has to fill out, and that's where it can get a little tricky with trusts or LLCs or corporations, because you can do more than one type of entity with these things.
Right.
Trust is the easy one that we deal with. So that process can get a little trickier, but that's the how it kind of unfolds when you do it yourself as far as your own trust. Typically, most of these trusts are going to have, so when you have a revocable trust, this is a revocable trust, so it's not something you're creating. You don't lose any control. In fact, this is all about control. You are the grantor, or you might hear it called trustor or settlor. You're the person who creates this trust. Then you have to have somebody you agree with, who's the trustee that will manage this trust. Well, the little dirty little secret is that that's you as well. So you agree with yourself to create and fund this trust. If you
my wife would disagree that I agree, but that's okay.
Yeah. Right. But and I tell people, if I do revocable trust discussions in hospitals, I say if you have trouble negotiating that deal, we can get you help down the hallway. It involves medication.
Yeah.
So you're negotiating with yourself, but and then you're holding it for beneficiaries. So when you create one of these trusts, you know, Michael Ware creates a trust. He's the grantor, he's the beneficiary, he's the trustee, and he's the beneficiary. So he's all 3 hats. You can have other people that wear some of those hats simultaneously or successively. Most of them are created as a single grantor trust with a single trustee, but you could do a married couple as a co-grantors, co-trustees if you want to. Now, if you do that, they're both responsible persons who are both going to have to submit fingerprints, photos, and Form 23 when there's a transfer of an asset into that trust. So if they don't mind both doing that, that's fine. Otherwise, depending on the level of form you do, this is where the off-the-shelf forms probably don't have this, or if they do, be careful of the forms. One of our levels of forms, our mid-level 1 and up, have forms where you can add a co-trustee with you who has all the authority of a trustee, including taking possession of and selling and doing different assets. So I could create a trust, get my firearm into that trust. So then I had one person as the responsible party at that time, responsible person at that time, filling out one form and getting one set of fingerprints and photo, then notifying the CLEO, the chief law enforcement officer, one time.
Right.
And then I could add my wife as a co-trustee. And then she can have all the authority that I have over that trust as a co-trustee.
Okay.
Including the ability to go use the firearm if she wants to, as long as she's not a prohibited person under the federal national NFA, the National Firearms Act.
Right.
Then the question comes up, well, what if I want to add another one later? Well, I can remove my wife as a trustee, go get my next suppressor or short barrel rifle or shotgun, add it into the trust. I'm going to have to go through the rigmarole again of my own application, but then I can add her back in as a trustee. And so one time again. And so, and you can do that with all kinds of trustees. You can have 20 trustees if you want to. I think that's a little crazy, but because you're responsible to make sure that they're not prohibited persons. And if one person messes up, it puts all the assets in that trust at risk of being potentially confiscated.
Well, I have people
another benefit to these forms we use are you can add somebody who's just merely a beneficiary, no authority over the assets other than using it. And our recommendation is always to have a trustee in the presence of somebody doing that. You know, there's a little uncertainty there.
Right.
You know, we like clear laws, but you know, I think there's a little gray area there whether a beneficiary is actually a responsible person or not. The safest thing to assume yes, but it's even safer to make sure you have a trustee who is a responsible person with the beneficiary, and then you don't run afoul of it by accident and have them in possession of something that they're not qualified to have.
All right. Well, I have people that have asked me things like, why do I need a trust if it's just me and my son? And so I explained to him, and let's use the example or the what if scenario of a gentleman wants to buy a suppressor, and his son is 23 years old, and he buys it, or the father buys it as an individual. They go down to the little range that they have in the back 40 behind their house in the country, and they enjoy using it together. He says, "What's wrong with that?" And I explained to him, I said, "Well, as far as the law is concerned, nothing. But what you need to understand is when your son calls up and says, 'Hey, my buddies and I are going to go out to South Dakota on a prairie dog trip. Can I take that suppressor with me?' Then the answer is no. You can't, because I'm not there and I own it as an individual." That's what the father would say. And since you don't have any, you're not able to possess that serial number, then you can't do that. So when I talk with people about that, they're like, "Well, I should be exploring the trust option then, because I want to pass these things down to my children, or either that or my brother and I want to join a trust together, because there are certain items that he wants to buy, there are certain items that I want to buy, and we want them over in one umbrella so that we can cross-use them." And I just tell them, I said, "Well, the trust is something you should explore, because you have some of those freedoms, if you will, in terms of ownership and use, depending on how you set it up and what you do." So I think that there's a lot of merit to owning suppressors or any of your NFA or collection like that. Now, I have heard people say that they don't want other things combined in that trust. And that's something that I think you and I spoke about not long ago. Can you illustrate why you'd want a gun trust for certain things without other stuff being put in there, and why?
Yeah. So let me give one example though on your not necessarily even the South Dakota hunting trip. It can be something as innocuous as I have a 24-year-old son, so I could have a suppressor. We could go out shooting it. It's in my possession. That's fine. We accidentally leave it in his car. He drives away. He gets pulled over. There's a search of his car. Now he's in possession of something that he has no authority to be owning. He's in constructive possession, or he's actual possession of something that's. So you could back into something like that as well, and having it in the trust, especially if all the people involved are either beneficiaries or trustees, at least gives you a speed bump on the way to trouble there. So having other assets in there or not, and so. You know, Michael, some of these questions are things you ask two attorneys and get 3 opinions on them, and even as you go along. So my thinking as I delve into these things kind of evolves too. So I've had some clients who want a separate NFA trust for every separate NFA weapon, and there may be reasons, unless you have different parties involved in those trusts for some reason. I'm not convinced that that's required or necessary. Somebody may want it for their convenience. There has to be a reason for doing that, I think. So you could have more than one NFA weapon in there. As far as having other weapons in there or not, the language is really geared toward NFA weapons, but it doesn't prohibit having other things in there. You probably would have some accessories in there, right? So I have my suppressor, but I also have the connector or adapter, or I'm probably not using the correct term here, but I need the the connector that's going to connect it to my 9
Host.
millimeter reader. What?
Host.
The host. I need the host. Well, I may want that host as part of the trust. So
yeah,
it's not that those things you put in there. It's no problem. Other firearms, I come down to thinking it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen the other, way you want to put them in there or not. If all of those other firearms, if I have shotguns and other guns that I want to go to the same people will be able to use them, and I'm okay with that one trust controlling disposition of all those assets, I don't have as much resistance to putting in there as I might have in the past. If I have different things I want to do, they're part of my broader estate, well, then I'd keep them out and separate and deal with them in your other documents.
Okay.
One of the concerns that I had to kind of sort through when I started dealing with these was putting an NFA weapon in this trust and putting other weapons in there. Do I expose those other weapons to being confiscated if something goes bad? Here's where I've kind of looked at that, and you know, it's evolution for us all, right, on this thinking.
Right.
Is that this is a revocable trust. Any other trust you might have is a revocable trust. And if I've screwed up and they're coming after my firearms, they're coming after them in whatever pocket I have them in. So the better mechanism might be to have some way where you can resign as grantor, turn over ownership and everything of that trust, rather than worrying about what's in it or not, because they're going to come after that, but they're also going to come after. If I get a domestic protective order against me for doing something at home that I shouldn't do, they're going to come after the firearms trust. They're going to come after my other weapons as well. And it really won't matter which pocket they're in. And I think a trust is kind of like a pocket. So
right.
That may be a little different than you and I talked about some time ago in the past, but
right.
That's where I am currently on that issue.
Okay. Well, what kinds of things do we need to shore up for Iowans and beyond that we haven't touched here? We've kind of we've taken a shot at trying to get people to understand the idea behind why you have value in a trust and what it may look like. So, is there anything else that we need to touch on real quick?
No, just be careful who you put on these things, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And and make sure that make sure your wife's on board or your spouse is on board if you can do these things.
Well, I think that, I know people that have said, oh, my next door neighbor was a really great guy, got along with at barbecues for years, and then they entered into some sort of a legal agreement. I don't mean to imply that it was an NFA trust together, but something that was legal or binding, and then they found out later, man, that was a really bad idea. So you're right, know who you're putting in or adding to your trust, and oh, by the way, I think it's wiser if you're able to get rid of them in a moment's notice too.
Yep, and if you have a well-drafted NFA trust, if it's your asset and you're in control, you have a mechanism to get rid of them. It's not like dissolving a business. I'm helping people do that too.
Sure.
Two good friends who went into business together and didn't work out, and now we're in the messy process of trying to dissolve a limited liability company. This isn't like that, and it's not as messy as that, which is why another reason I think a trust is easier than, say, a limited liability company, which you could do for this kind of a firearm as well.
Sure. Okay. All right. So in the description of this video, we're going to again mention that you're Bill Gustoff, managing partner at Hagenow Gustoff, and we'll also put a link to what do you want to your site and the person or the information so people can contact you.
Sure, just the website would be good.
Okay, I'll do that. And is there anything else in parting that we need to know? Again, thank you for your years of service to IFC and by extension, all the members. We appreciate your legal work and what you've done for us. So anything in parting?
I don't think so. Nope, nothing to add to the recording. So.
All right. Thank you, everybody, again. Bill Gustoff, thank you for your time today. And hopefully this helps some people. If there's any kind of questions in the comments sections, we'll try and handle those as best we can and proceed. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.